I want you to get together.
How about
Wow,
that?
that's interesting because I think that there's so many like obviously things in the culture, and I don't know. It's like from the earliest time I can remember, people saying I'm afraid of clowns, and it's almost like did has anyone ever said I like clowns? I mean, because like that's like there's way more people say that I'm kind of creeped out by clowns without noting any connection to the demonic, especially Nephilim,
Hmm.
and just saying clowns kind of freak me out a little bit. They're just a little bit strange, and it's like I think so. Like as like I said, at first I thought it was a little provocative, but then I was just like, but you know, like why? Like in the movies, clowns are presented as evil way more than they're presented as funny characters.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
almost always presented as dark and weird and sinister. And obviously, you can say you just look around just pop culture. It's just like that's how they're represented. So, I mean, it makes more sense than you realize.
Yeah, well, coulrophobia, which is the fear of clowns, is actually it's up there. It's surprisingly up there on the list of top 10
Mm-hmm.
fears, and it's kind of like it's so bizarre, isn't it? It's like because you got spiders, you got snakes, you got heights, the big three. Just generally people just have an aversion to,
Right.
and you could argue, well, that's a predator response to snakes and spiders. If I'm not promoting evolution here, but they would argue, we used to be hunted by these things, therefore we have an inbuilt fear of them because of we used to live in forests which had snakes and spiders killing us. But if you can go that far to explain that, if you want to go that way, but why clowns? Why would you be scared of a clown? And it's funny because every like year or 2 years, you can search them up. There's been an article released every year or so by some newspaper somewhere to talk about the fear of clowns. They always bring it up every year, and they always say the same thing. It's kind of like they're trying to get this people to believe why you're scared of clowns is it's because of the uncanny valley. It's almost human but not
Mm-hmm.
quite, and it scares people. Masks
Mm-hmm.
scare people because you can't read their emotion, and we naturally as humans need to read people's emotions. It's an evolutionary thing. So and when we don't trust people who wear masks, so naturally it's a fear. But I'm starting to think that's kind of the cover story. I think it's more the predator response thing, like the other ones. Because if if the clowns are a caricature of what the Nephilim would have looked like, because that's what it truly is. I'm not saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people really need to get this because I've heard, some of my critics would say that. Of course, the Nephilim did look like clowns. I don't mean they went around with big red wigs and big red bulbous honk noses with horns going honk honk on unicycles like that. That's a joke parodied caricatured image of what the Nephilim truly did look like, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The clown is meant to look silly to us today. That's how we're supposed to interpret it. It's a mirror, and I think the real fear comes from they used to hunt us, they used to eat us. We were prey to
Mm-hmm.
them. And it's just ingrained deeply into us, our collective psyche of humanity, to when you see something that looks like that, you run or you stay still, you panic, you have a prey response to a predator like this. Giants, what are you supposed to do when you see a giant with a huge big red serpentine smiling grinning sharp toothed mouth, giant glowing eyes staring down at you with this wild crazy blood red hair? What are you going to do? You're looking up at this enormous like 15-foot monster in front of you that clearly wants to eat you. It's kind of yeah. I don't think you're going to forget that very quickly. I think humanity has remembered. So yeah.
What's
I think
interesting?
it's
Oh no,
I think
good,
it's
Brian.
I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you should follow my channel or anything yet, but but I have a video that I talk about Tengu in Japanese.
Yeah.
What Tengu is? Have you seen my channel or anything like
I've
that?
not seen the
The thing
channel,
that I
but
have on Tengu?
I know
Okay.
Tengu is a half bird, half
Mhm.
demon type creature with a big long red nose and like griffin style feet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so here's the thing. He's also a caricature of what a Jew was. And people don't know this, but and like I broke it down in a video and it's very fascinating. But the Jews were known for the nose, right? And so Tengu has this big long nose, right? And then it's also he's depicted as being red. And it's red because he was a white man. It was a white Jew of
Hmm.
some kind. And it was Ten Jew. It's not Tengu, it's Ten Jew, and 10 is their word for heaven, and it comes from heaven. Okay, so it was the heavenly Jew, and Tengu brought the Torah Nomaki, which is the Nomaki is the scroll of, and Torah, the Torah Nomaki. Tengu brought the Torah. Like I don't know how boldly and this is my theory I put out there, and it's blown up all over the internet too with this, but like literally you see this replication and this exaggeration of Tengu turning from the Tengu has this little black box that he wears on his head. And I don't know if you've seen the Teflon that the Jews wear, this little black box on their head, which contains the scrolls that they put in there when they're trying to memorize it. Like Tengu is a caricature of what originally a Jew was, a Jew that brought the Torah to the Japanese people. That's what Tengu is. And but people are like, no, that's not Tengu. He's got wings, dude. The wings are a caricature representation of the fact that Tengu supposedly came from heaven. Who's in heaven? Birds. They fly in the air, so they gave him wings. It doesn't mean that Tengu had wings. It just is a caricature representation. And then the red skin and the red nose oftentimes is a character representation, just like in Tengu, of people that were white. So white people, light-skinned people, were depicted as having red noses, also because they were also oftentimes drunk because they would drink alcohol, and so there's like this red nose effect that you'd get. And so this is like a depiction that I think reflects into the clown aesthetic as well in some degree, because they were probably like drunk all the time. They're drunk, bumbling, demonic entity Nephilim that would just go around eating people.
So on the red nose situation. So first of all, Tengu being that's the first time I've heard that theory. Interesting. Yeah,
I've got a thing on it.
Yeah, I'll look into that. There's a lot of connections. There's clearly a lot of symbolic connections there. In terms of caricaturing things, this is what humans naturally do. We seem to have a way. We're artistic by nature. I think that's naturally what we do. And I think in Japan, I think the Oni is actually the most closest thing to a Nephilim that we can actually get in terms of a representation of what the Nephilim specifically would have been like. And the Oni demon with the wide smile, the buck teeth sticking up and down either way, the wild-eyed look to it, that's actually extremely similar to the masks worn of the dragon masks in China. And the Hindu Rakshasa demons as well. It's identical to them. It's also identical to the Greek Gorgon Medusa, which was a half-human, half-reptile hybrid, birthed out of a female monster hybrid and a sea god, so a fallen angel with a siren. And it says in the Book of Enoch that the women who mated with the fallen angels became sirens. So it's the same story told over every continent. The Rakshasas were giant, man-eating giants that subjugated mankind and turned them and became the slave class, and they ruled over them as kings.
They were also guards of them. Yeah.
I think the Asuras were considered guards, and then the Rakshasas were the negative aspects. But I think it's just two sides of the same demonic coin, the good and the bad. That duality play is just a lie. I think they use that to control people. In fact, the good cop, bad cop dichotomy, I think is a bit of a demonic play. Good or bad cop demons are still demons at the end of the day. They're still an abomination in the eyes of the Lord, so it doesn't matter, But I think they played a lot of games with people during that antediluvian time to keep themselves in power. But yeah, the Asuras look identical to the Rakshasas. If you actually look at them, there's there's no difference to them. They just put the Asuras as guardians on their temples, and the Rakshasas are the demons they were supposed to be fighting against. But they look the same. They look like monstrous, big.
They all look the same, yeah.
Monstrous, like serpent-human hybrids. And this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about the Nephilim. And a lot of my work is an anthropological study of all of these cultures all around the earth, and I'm threading together the similar vein they all have when representing their version of a demon. And you realize they have the same traits, the same they have their own aesthetical way of artistically depicting it, their own cultural stylization, but they're all fundamentally describing and depicting through their caricatures the same creatures. And you'll find clownish features often repeat over and over again. Pale white skin, some kind of red nose motif or multicolored patterns all over the face, whether it be polka dots or triangles or something. Some kind of headdress, which makes the hair look red, whether it's feathers, red straw, or even a golden headdress full of jewels of some kind, giving that radiating halo effect. They usually have makeup on their face to make their eyes look much larger. And they often give themselves a big wide grin as well, whether that's in makeup or in masks or whatever they use to venerate or dress like. The clownish features appear, and the clothes are always colourful, psychedelic, with ribbons or rags or something, or some kind of bejeweled effect, a lot like a clown costume. You'll find people have been dressing like the demons for as long as oral traditions have and rituals have existed, and it's because what they're doing is they're trying to channel the ancestor spirits, as they call them. So
Right.
they consider them the builders of their ancient civilization. So they're not talking about grandma or granddad or your uncles when they say ancestors. They're talking about
And 100%.
the old ancient gods who created their civilization, who they still venerate, the Nephilim. The Nephilim put
Yeah,
themselves...
exactly. Because
Yeah.
because I think we try to explain that to people too. It's like ghosts are real, but they're not the ghosts of your grandma.
No.
Like the spirits that are here are unclean spirits. They're
Absolutely.
spirits of the Nephilim. And I was wondering I'd wondered if you have seen this before. So obviously you started doing this before, obviously most people talking about this, or, you know, I don't know, as far as connections on YouTube and any of the people who are seeking the truth. But it was interesting. So I was going back down the rabbit hole, and somebody saying, "Hey, have you ever seen that show Supernatural?" And it's like, gosh, it's probably like 20 seasons. I don't know how long it's been on the air, but I was watching an episode, and I think it was right around the time people were telling me to connect with you. There is an episode called Season 2, and this is like Season 2, Episode 2, and it came out in 2006, and it was called Everyone Loves a Clown.
Yeah.
And literally in this show, they do expose a little bit of truth in there. I think they put it in there. They literally say this clown that people are seeing, it's obviously a murderous clown, is a Rakshasa, or a Rakshasa, how do you say it?
Yeah.
Have you seen that episode?
Well, funnily enough,
of course I said I knew you had to.
It's funny you mentioned this. So I started my series in 2016. I started with very little knowledge on clowns. I wasn't a clown guy. I've never cared about them, you know. And I've never watched Supernatural. So I never got this information from anything prior. But one of my recent episodes in my Nephilim Look Like Clown series is episode 42. So I'm quite deep into this, you know. I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
And 42 episodes in, and I released this episode where I examine the Rakshasa demon of all the Hindu-inspired countries of the, you know, the Austro-Asian area, you know, and that covers a lot of places: Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, going across to the Philippines, Bali, Papua New Guinea. You know, there's a lot of islands. It's a big archipelago, but they've all been influenced by the same ideology, Hinduism, and they all have their own depictions of a Rakshasa demon. So I did a whole episode on that, and showing how, you know, if you look at the features of a Rakshasa demon, you'll realize that they're identical to the Greek depictions of their own versions of demons, or the wild man depictions up here, or Japan, the Oni, and China. And you'll find, you know, the commonality, the thread going across a lot of cultures. And after I made that episode, somebody said what you just said to me. Have you actually seen this episode of Supernatural? You know,
it might have been you. It might have been me. I remember in the comments, because I was like, "Did you see that?" Because I literally just watched that, and I was like, well, I guess it was confirmation I need to have it on the show. I was like, that's weird.
Yeah. So
because obviously it's like some people might say, like, as they say to me all the time, you're reaching, bro. And it's like, obviously they just straight up showed it in this show. Like, this is a clown. Actually, it's not really a clown. It looks like a clown. It's actually a Rakshasa. It's this Hindu demon.
Yeah, specifically. And that's the thing, because I weaved my theory into the history of the clown costume in the West, and where do we get it from, and what's it modeled after exactly. And you know, that's a whole huge long conversation in its own right, that history. But basically, to summarize that quickly and why this is relevant to the Rakshasa, there was a time in the 1800s where there was a big shake-up in the industry of theatre, and the British theatre specifically. And a son of a very prominent, famous Freemason called Charles Dibdin, his son, who is also called Charles Dibdin to complicate matters, but that's what they did then. So Charles Dibdin Sr., who was a famous Freemasonic songwriter, very famous for making music, okay, and writing plays, big rock star of the time, and what do you know, he was a part of the craft, the Freemason Brotherhood, you know. So I reckon his son was probably the same, to be honest, because in true nepotistic fashion, his son got to take over one of the prominent theatres of London at that time. So, you know, my dad's famous, you better let me run the theatre type of situation. And as soon as he got in there, he did a shake-up, and he changed the costume of a clown. Now, the costume of a clown hasn't changed in like 300 years since its inception in like the mid-1500s, okay? It's always been a boring, white, plain, ragged
Just
servant
white.
garb. Just white, yeah. There was no reason to change the costume of a clown that we could see. His argument was, I want to make my mark on the industry, so I'm going to change the look of the clown, you know. But then you look at what he changed it into, and it's the most monstrous-looking, psychedelic, freakish thing you've ever seen in your entire life. You know, and it's kind of like, how did you get from plain, boring white servant garbs to this? Like, how did you? That's a leap, you know, by any standard. You know, and you look into it and you realize, well, actually, Charles Dibdin Sr., his father, he had a brother called Thomas, who was a member of the East India Company, who was colonizing India, the British Navy at that time. And Charles Dibdin himself travelled back and forth to India a lot. He was even going to live there, but he decided to not. He changed his mind when the ship couldn't set sail because of bad weather, and he decided to stay in England. So they loved India. The Dibdins loved that country, and I reckon they took their inspiration from the demonic symbolism on the temples, specifically the Asuras and the Rakshasas off the Thai temples, and another one called a Kalasungsang Rakshasa demon, which means upside down demon, with the same face, you know. But I reckon they saw this iconography and brought it back to England and decided, I'm going to dress the clown like a Rakshasa demon. And you can actually find examples where they've done drawings of Joseph Grimaldi, the actor of the day who donned the first costume, in this upside down position on his hands, with his legs in the air, with his head bent up facing you. And that's identical to how the Rakshasa Kalasungsang is depicted in Bali. It's identical, you know, and it's kind of, you clearly see where they got their inspiration from. They have just modeled the entire costume and makeup after a demon in India. Specifically, like, bang on, that's where they got it from. There's not a shadow of a doubt. You can see it clear as day once you put the two next to each other. Yeah, that's what. But no history book mentions that anywhere. They've just glossed over that fact. They don't bring it up. They don't talk about it. What you'll find is a lot of talk about how smart Joseph Grimaldi was, the actor who created the first costume of a clown. He had nothing to do with it. He was a Freemason.
Right.
You know?
Let me ask you a question. So as you were saying, when you were doing, you know, experimenting with drugs and you were seeing like these jester type characters, I remember before I ever, you know, started doing it, you know, going down the rabbit hole, I was listening to Joe Rogan. He had guys like Graham Hancock on, and they were talking about DMT.
Yeah.
And they were specifically talking about going down there, doing ayahuasca in the, you know, in the Amazon, working with shaman, and all these people experiencing these obviously these trips where they're seeing entities. Joe Rogan talks about smoking DMT, seeing jesters. And is there any kind of an equivalent? Yeah, what's interesting is like, so ayahuasca is the vine of the dead. Okay, so you're going in with this medicine man. It's like, okay, so obviously they're attempting to contact ancestors. And then they just so happen to start seeing like serpent type beings, jesters, like clowns,
looking beings with snakes all over there coming out of their head and everything.
Yeah.
Is it possible that the Dibdins, when they were in India, in India is, I know that you think about like the Beatles going over to the Far East and coming back with all this kind of like hippy dippy stuff, the yoga, and then all of the stuff that's inspired like the 60s. Is there a DMT equivalent like that, or I mean, like whatever they use over in India to have their, you know, the religious ceremonies when they probably venerate the Rakshasa and all the weird stuff they do?
They primarily wear costumes to be specifically possessed by demons. That's how they open their channels. They do rituals where they dress like the demons, like the ancestors. And this is the point. Like, you don't need drugs to be possessed by a demon. All you need to do is dress like one.
That's true.
That's the secret. That's the secret they don't want anyone to know, in fact. That's the secret that gets used by all the music industry, in fact. If you dress like a psychedelic clown monster and white up your skin and red up your lips, you will be elevated through the industry. You will be. If not by the demon within you giving you skills you don't prior have, the people that run the industry will notice you and put you on a pedestal for others to emulate and copy. Because the more people they can get dressing that way, the more channels they open up. You know, and that's why these.
Is that a Lady Gaga situation where she's, you know, like when Lady Gaga first hits the scene, besides the fact that she likely stole some other pop star's identity, that was what she was known for at the beginning, was that she was dressing up in the most outlandish stuff. And it's interesting how like you have like the Doja Cats wearing all of the gems and, you know, like, yeah, they like dressing these people in like the most ridiculous ways. You think models and stuff like runway models, it's like, what, like, obviously they do stuff that no one would actually wear.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
is it has something to do with
It's
that?
part of the embodiment.
It's
for
the same
sure.
thing. It's the same practice all these ancestor spirit cultures do. You know, in India, for example, you have something called the Theyyam. Now, the Theyyam is a very old practice. It's probably predates Hinduism itself, actually, and they still do it in this one specific region of India. And they basically have one person of the village who's the shaman. They don't call him a shaman, but that's their version of a shaman by any standards. And he would basically dress in this orange-skinned black makeup with serpentine black slit makeup eyes, adorn him in like a demon mask with like fangs and everything. He had this huge aura around him. He wears this very elaborate dress, and even when he does this, he has to go through a ritual while being painted by specific people. It's all very ritualized and ceremonial, you know, from start to finish. Then he comes out to the public, and then the people have to give him offerings like chickens, live chickens, and if they do, he has to eat it. He has to bite the head off the chicken because he is the embodiment of the demon. They are feeding the demon who now has embodied this particular god, this person who is dressed like the god. And then he channels the demon and they ask it questions like, how can I solve this family conflict? What do I need to do to solve this financial issue? And that's what the ritual's for, to gain insight and power and knowledge from the channel, the individual dressed like the demon who is now channeling it. And you can look into it. That's called the Theyyam in India. And there's another one very similar just across the way, which has a slightly different name and a slightly different aesthetic, but they do the same thing. They dress that way and they get possessed. That's the trick.
It's called the fame, like fame, like famous people.
No,
Like the
T
fame?
H E Y YUM. So they.
Like Thames, like the Thames River.
Yeah, kind. Yeah. They. You know, like pronouns. They, them.
Oh, so like they, them. That's even more. That's even more fascinating and funny because.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have so much to say about that. I wanted to mention something to you actually because I find this very very interesting when it comes to acting. You know, in Cambodia, there's a word for magic. It's sel. Okay, and I don't know if you know that the word for magic, and that refers to like witchcraft and occultism. And then selaba is in Cambodian. It's their same word for sel is their word for art and dance and acting. It's the same root word for art, dance, and acting is derived from magic. They call it magic. And so they literally will call dance, and because they know that those moves where they move their hands and they do those dancing, and that's where those the things that look similar to the Rakshasa, like the giants that were in Cambodia as well, and they're giant clowns. That's literally what they are. And like they embody these things with their dance, and they're doing what they call magic. It's the embodiment of the acting of that takes on that persona. And I think it's very fascinating because I was just in LA, and I went by a place that I used to, before I was like a Christian, I'd gone there a lot, and it was like this improv studio, and I just went by to check it out and be like, see what it's like over there, just kind of see around. I was with a friend, and when we went there, they were doing a class, and the class was called Clown. It's a new type of improv called Clown that is going on all over the place right now, apparently. And what it is, and I watched this and I watched the whole thing because I was kind of in shock a little bit when I walked into this, and I'm like, what's going on? Oh, it's Clown. And I'm like, Clown? I was like, this is strange. And so I watched they're doing their improv, and literally it's like a improv group, but it's almost like embodying. They constantly talk about embodying the identity of the silliness or whatever, or try to feel the entity coming into you, the clown coming into you. And I'm like listening to this woman saying, like, giving instructions to all these group of people, and I'm just like kind of shockingly watching this, like people being possessed. And I'm like thinking that because I cast demons out, bro. I like pray demons off of people, and so like this is like what I do. And so when I'm seeing this, I'm just like, these people are getting possessed right in front of my face. I'm like watching them do this ritual, and I'm like, this is shocking. And people think that this is funny and normal, and they're like laughing. And towards the end of the thing, they're doing like this improv acting, and someone walks in with a baby, bro. Someone walks in with a baby, and the people on the stage that are doing their improv go, baby, baby. And the other one goes, eat, baby. And they start acting out eating a baby. Like, I'm not even joking. I'm watching this, like, and everybody's laughing in the audience, and I'm like, you guys have no freaking clue what you guys are laughing at. Like, you guys think that's funny? Like, you have no clue that the people on stage are literally channeling a demon, and it's mocking you about how it wants to eat your children.
I want you to get together